Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Rolling Stories. This is a podcast sponsored and supported by Loring Aries. And today we are very happy to be able to invite our esteemed guest, Kevin Chua, onto the show with us. Hi, Kevin. Welcome to the show.
Thank you, Adrian. It's my pleasure to be on this show.
For the audience who may not be familiar with yourself, could you give us an introduction about your background and how you arrived to where you are?
So my name is Kevin, and I'm a HR leader with more than 25 years of experience. Most recently, I've been a CHRO of a large local organization, but I've also done previously global and APAC roles with multinationals. And for a period of time, I was actually based in my company's headquarters in London. In terms of industries, I've primarily been involved in the biomedical sector as well as the public administration and higher education sector. And personally, I've been involved in business and HR transformation for more than 15 years.
Wow, that's an amazing journey. Perhaps we'd like to start off by sharing with us a bit on the experience that you've encountered through all these different organizations, the key differences that you spotted between this, the geographical differences, the kind of industry differences. What are the kind of differences that you have observed, and how does it actually impact the kind of role that you're in that other people may also be performing, right?
Okay, yeah, thanks, Adrian. So I think I'm very, very blessed and very fortunate to be able to work in multiple industries and multiple geographies, both, in our headquarter organization outside of Singapore as well as based out of Singapore. Uh, I think long and short, many of the issues are transferable. Many of the issues are the same, but context is different. Context in terms of geographical context, the profile of organizational maturity, where the headquarters is, these are quite different. And the stage of the organization, is it going through consolidation? Is it going through rapid growth? Whether you are in the HQ or not the HQ. So one example of this HQ, non-HQ is that if you are the headquarters, the buck stops with you or with me. I have to decide which is the direction to go, where is the direction to go. Oftentimes, when I work in multinationals, where I'm part of the regional team, yes, I do have an input into the global direction, but it's mainly on execution, and executing well. Whereas if you are the headquarters, then, you decide on everything. And you solicit inputs from your stakeholders, but the buck stops with me, and I have to make those decisions. So for example, in the area of HR technology, the big players are Workday and SAP SuccessFactors. In big multinationals, the decision is made, we execute. In a headquarter type organization, which do you go for? What are the pros and cons? How do you integrate with all the other systems, not just the HR IT system, but with finance, with the enterprise systems? And so that decision making rests with headquarter type function. So I think that's one of the big key difference in terms of decision making and who have the final say in that sense.
And given your exposure across so many years of looking at all this implementation, HR technology, how has things evolved, especially for our younger audience who may have only seen the recent iteration? Could you share with us your experience or walk us through perhaps the first instance that you've encountered HR technology versus what you have most recently seen?
Okay, that will betray my age, if I start talking about the ancient of days. But anyway, I will make a go for it. I think initially, when I was first involved, typically the HRIT, well, let me take the most primitive version I've seen. I was in a startup type organization. Probably we started at, when I joined, it was about 100, 150 people. We are single entity, so not part of a global organization. And it was basically Excel spreadsheet and Microsoft Access. And that's it for a 100-man outfit. Absolutely nothing about manager self-service or employee self-service. None of that sort. When I worked for somewhat larger organizations, and in the early days, this must be about more than 20 years ago, they tend to be back-end HR systems that are not integrated. So even though I may be part of a multinational, I'm located at a particular location, say in Singapore, even if there's another location, in Singapore, our system may not talk to each other. So that was the day, where things were not integrated complete back end. And then it went to a situation where it's completely back end, but integrated. The key difference in integrating is that then there is in a way, source of truth. The headquarter or global is able to aggregate people data. Before that, when you have disparate systems, you have to ask everybody to submit on a monthly basis, and then somebody back end consolidates. With an integrated system, more or less you can press a button and you get the number. And I remember a time where I was part of a big multinational. It was it was not an integrated system then, and we had multiple versions of, say, in those days, SAP. Different units had different versions of SAP. Different units have like bespoke system. And there was a whole team of people trying to consolidate data. Fast forward a little bit, and then we see things like manager self-service, employee self-service. And then fast forward more, you see applications on mobile phones, and a lot more self-service. And even fast forward to today, you see chatbot, virtual assistant, and the empowerment of digital tools to lay people, non-technical people in HR, that we can automate stuff ourselves. So really, that's I would say, broad evolution. I think also, in the past, as I said, HR IT tend to be more back end, and then more and more stuff got automated. Yeah. So initially, it was just collecting of employee data, and then I remember one of the first automation was the leave approval. Where somebody can put in the leave and then you get approval. And then later on, it was like performance appraisal. Today, you have all sorts of things, including 360, a lot of other type of manager approvals, all inbuilt. And the recruitment system, initially they were separate systems. Now more and more I see are integrated systems. And all the different functionality put together in a HR technology.
Obviously, it sounds very feature rich compared to the older days of course, Excel and Access. But it also begs a question, would those layering on of features add complexity and unnecessary complication to the implementation process? Because a wider audience will have to be involved. How is it being managed right now to ensure that implementation does not go wrong?
Really good question. Definitely adds complexity. So I think when any organization wants to uh, implement a HR tech solution, I think the organization needs to see baseline itself. What does it intend to do? Why does it want to do this? And how much of a appetite to change? So what I've seen also is that, and where's the baseline? If the baseline is absolutely nothing, then you could do module by module or function by function. What is the biggest pain point? Where is the part that there's the most manual work? And then implement module by module. So in my previous organization, one of the things that we did was to decide that we would go on a module by module launch over a period of 6 months. In another previous organization, I remember that we said, okay, we will automate everything except the recruitment system. And then recruitment system will come later. We wanted the more traditional HR IT system. And even then also we said, we'll do the leave management system first, and then later on the performance appraisal. So performance appraisal in those days were paper-based, or shall I say Microsoft Word-based, and then, sent by email here and there. So I remember the leave management system went first together with your employee data, and then later on at another phase, the performance management system, and then the recruitment system comes in. So there are ways to stage and phase out the implementation so that it's not all at one go, and then, it hits the organization too too much change and too much complexity.
And when you mentioned about the selection of a 6 months period, pilot period, and of course going through module by module, what are some of the consideration behind it? Why 6 months? Why not 8 months, for instance? And why module A then module B and not the other way around? What are some of the consideration and criteria one has to think through to come up with the best possible plan to make sure that the implementation is seamless?
Great question. It's not a magic figure or magic bullet. I think, some of the things that we thought about, I think let me talk about the modules first and which goes first. Easier to decide because the baseline, I think the module that has to go first is all the employee data. Without that, all the other all the other modules cannot work. So that part needs to go live first. And I've seen organizations who say, let's move that first. Forget about all the, and then we run in parallel, old system, new system. Let's get all that stuff migrated over, make sure that it's running smoothly before you go next. And then the next piece is that which are the quick wins, which are the ones that are pain points. If I don't think today there's many biggish organizations that have manual leave management system. But in the old days, it was very manual. It is absolutely a pain point. There is a lot of manual work involved. Yeah, so that naturally becomes, okay, we need to automate this first. What I've also seen is that the performance management system, the appraisal system, it can be standalone for even one whole cycle. Yeah, so that tends to be one of the last few core modules. And then you have things like 360 and all of that. Okay, it doesn't matter if you don't have it in the first instance. So that is pushback. So that's, in terms of which module to go first, that would be the thing, which are critical, where are the pain points, where is the most manual processing, and where are the quick wins. In terms of timing, again, it's not a one answer fit all. It really depends on the change appetite as well as the resource of the organization. Do you have the resource? My suggestion is not have a large chunk push through within a 6 months period, because to have an implementation team and just launching and launching and launching and launching and no end in sight, it's actually mentally very draining for the people involved in the project. So it's best that you have a core set of modules that you launch, celebrate the success, reap the fruits, reap the benefits, and then, go for the next few pieces. And even when we do that, I would say that there's always no perfect answer. You can plan as much as you want. When we implement, we expect to have hiccups. So, one of the approach that we use is the 80-20 principle. Get it 80% right, get it out first, rather than try to perfect every little micro level detail. So get that out first, and then we make improvement along the way. And expect that there'll be pain points, expect that there would be challenges, there's teething problems, people are not used to it. So in fact, the success of the HR tech implementation, apart from the technology, is really about change management. Yeah, and how well we do change management to both the user as well, to the HR team as well as to our employees and managers.
I'm glad you brought up about the hiccups because many people also may have the impression that everything can be done according to the T, which obviously isn't true. There's many instances where things may fall apart. I do not mean to revisit your old wound, but are there examples of such hiccups that you thought maybe initially, okay, this is something within our control, but somehow things just did not go right? And what are some of the lessons that you believe other people can learn from?
Yeah. So I think painful as it might be, it is learning lessons, and each time we implement something, there are lessons to be learned. I can think of a few. One piece is quite process design. Process design. What I mean by that is that increasingly we want everything to be manager self-service. So we design. I remember this is the recruitment module. We design everything to be manager self-service. The manager needs to kick off the process to say, I want to recruit. and, we make the manager in that organization, we make the manager fill in things like cost center and all the back end information. And the manager scratch his head and doesn't know, because they don't know what cost center, how should we charge, how they split, and all the really back end stuff. So in order to get the process going, because if they don't fill in all these forms and fields, the process cannot start. So rubbish in, and rubbish in, and then it goes to the recruiter who says, I need to go recruit. I don't care if it's rubbish. I don't care if the cost center is wrong. I don't care if, this person is on a bonus type 1 instead of bonus type 2. Let me just go recruit. So it just goes on, the process goes on. And then finally it goes to the HR business partner or the shared services who say, hey, hang on, you got all of this wrong. And, it's so much of a trouble to re-enter and re-key in all this stuff when we have the candidate and the person is about to start, and we got, the offer letter wrong. So that was a lesson learned. I think, should we have made the manager do all of that? I think not. I think it's better that some of this back end stuff be handled by a core team who knows this better. So there, because the manager takes a path of least resistance and just, I need to get this going, so I can't be bothered with what data I'm going to key in. I'll just fill in rubbish. That's one example. I think another example was it's a organization has a very unique process that the HRIT HR technology didn't have the process, so we make do. And again, it stemmed from the belief that everything needs to be on this system. Yeah. So we put in this functionality, and it was so much of a pain that the HR team complained about it, the manager complained about it, user complained about it. We had to take a difficult decision about 9 months after the rollout to say, we are going to can this. We're going to stop this. We'll redesign the whole thing from scratch using another system and bolt it on. Yeah. A third example is appraisal. I remember when we were doing it on the Microsoft Word version, it has a certain feel and look and all of that. But when we put it on the HR technology, it became so convoluted and the process flow didn't work. And the next year, after one painful year, the next year we said, okay, we have to re-look at the entire process and how to redesign the process so that it's much smoother. So plenty of examples of that, whereby we actually have to take a step back to say, does this work? If it doesn't work, are we prepared to can it and redo this entire thing? And not be so dogmatic that, everything has to be in a particular way, whether be it manager self-service or that everything has to be on one platform, or in the system must replicate the manual process, whatever that case may be. Take a pragmatic approach, look at what needs to be done to have a successful implementation.
Your final example reminded me of another instance which I've heard a few years ago. A small local bank was trying to implement or digitize a performance review process. Similar to your experience, they were using pen and paper previously, and then they moved over to online. But then the online version did not allow free text. It's just radio buttons. And they were just hoping that, okay, everyone just submit radio button, then easy to consolidate because all the data is in the system. But the interesting bit is they still receive a few hundred copies of paper because some people just wanted to express themselves. They needed an outlet to free form. And not only that, it also accumulated to a number of complaints. What is this? Why can't I put in my feedback? Why are you trying to, shut us up and all that? Which of course wasn't the case. And it resulted in a year later, everything being canned. But I think most significantly, I was told that it resulted in the drop in trust of any new HR technology implementation. In fact, not just technology, any HR implementation in which the HR team has to take a backseat, lay low for a few months, in fact, a few quarters, before slowly coming back out with new initiative. I'm not sure is that something that you've also encountered by, in a way, somewhat disturbing or disrupting people's preferred process. It may result in, of course, the kind of future collaboration that may occur in the future?
Well, I think thankfully I did not come across a situation like that where we had to lay low. I think, as I say, it goes back to change management and the importance of change management. So I think at the time of launch, we needed to have several layers of support. One of course is self-service, and nowadays with chatbots and all that, we could do. And I've seen also in Workday there's something called say walk me through or something like that. There's you click a button, it there's a video comes out and tell you how you need to do it. And then the next level of support are really the users or the experts user embedded into the business. That their friends, if they are not sure, they can just go to them before it get escalated up. So that's one part of the support, during the hypercare part of the launch or immediately after the launch. I think secondly is that when there are feedback about pain points, there is a need to demonstrate authentic listening, very open listening, rather than say, nope, sorry, just get on with life. Really authentic listening to understand where the issues are and trying to solve them. So there's one case I mentioned earlier, one example whereby it was not a traditional or typical process flow, and we were trying to force it into our system. We had to listen, first of all, to even the HR team and then to the user to say, what can we do? And we came up with a list of short-term measures. Okay, this is how we're going to do it. Okay, if it's so much painful for the employee, maybe we can have a delegate function. So all the quick fixes in first, while we then decide, is it salvageable or do we need to can it and redo the entire process on a different system? So the noise level actually came down. As we developed the longer term solution, the longer term solution needed another 9 months, 10 months before we could roll out the newer system. But in the meantime, we do need to solve actual pain points on the ground. So additional self-help guides and all that had to go out very quickly. Allow delegate functions and stuff like that.
I really like this part where active listening really plays a big part. It's like intervening at the right time instead of letting it snowball to the extent where people are throwing things in the air and making that small little and allowing that small little problem accumulate into something which may be unmanageable.
Yeah.
And on that note, how does that apply to, say, even the pre-implementation phase, especially given that in today's context, a lot of systems are actually employee facing. And for a huge organization that may have 16,000 people, 20,000 people, obviously, active listening or soliciting feedback from each and every one of them may not be that practical. But to how much of an extent do you think HR should play a part in soliciting their feedback on usability, on preference, and so on?
Yeah, so I think when running a large organization, one must be mindful that there is a very diverse group of employees, and it's like any big population that there is a curve. You have the early adopters and you have the laggards. I think if you want to move forward, we cannot be talking to the laggards, and that's just the practical part. Because you're talking to laggards, they say, "Oh, please don't change anything. The paper and pen works, and let's just stick."
Just give me better pen and better paper.
Exactly. And so at the same time, I think I'll be cautious to speak to the early adopters because everything is great and let's go, let's go. So trying to find the right group of people to engage. And there's of course the process of stakeholder mapping, all of that. So apart from the employees, is who else do we need to engage? Are there apart from HR, and many of the HR system, HR tends to be the owner, but there are some processes that interface with, say, finance or interface with the risk function or whichever function. They are important stakeholders to say, okay, how can we work together and not be in a very silo manner? because as I said, many of the HR systems interface with finance systems. So really having close collaboration with the finance partners is important. And then talking to the users where talking to the right users, as I said, not to the laggards, but not to the very highly early adopters who are very tech savvy, uh, and trying to find a middle ground to say, how can we make it easier?
Right. So it's essentially trying to get a good sample size. Of course, I would say a good representation of the majority of the company
Exactly.
as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, because since they will ultimately be the key users of this system. I'd like to take a swing into something that you'll be seeing or looking at trends into the future, given how enterprise HRMS, the kind of tools that you're familiar with, has progressed over the years and decades, in fact. What are some of the things that you'll be looking out for, some of the trends that you're expecting to see, and importantly, some of the existing pain points which somehow is still not being fixed despite all this improvement over time?
Okay, so I think we need to slice this up into a few areas or areas, and I would say time uh, in terms of how far ahead. Right up, right ahead are things like metaverse, uh, AI, machine learning, and all that kind of stuff. How and there are many players right now in that space, and going into all of that. Do we want to implement those? What do we do? So really keeping an eye out, but not necessarily doing anything yet. You know, chatbot is probably, of this whole thing, chatbot is probably the most mature. I would say where possible, if the organization is large enough and there's scale, we should think of implementing chatbots, particularly if you have a call center and people keep calling the call center to find out things. Can we have a chatbot? Uh, I think good examples of this are the banking. When we do digital banking and online banking, instead of going through the portal and trying to do a search, you talk to a chatbot and chatbot gives you the answer. So can we do this rather than employees plowing through the HR policy to understand leave? Oh, what kind of leave am I eligible for? Can we have a chatbot that can answer? And today, there's a bank that I use that, each year there is a credit card a fee. In the past, I had to fill up a form to get a waiver. Today, I talk to the chatbot and I get a waiver. Can some of these transactions now be done by a chatbot instead for HR? I think that is a real possibility. And then the other stuff is I would say more, and putting aside all of this, so the metaverse, the AI, all that kind of stuff, right at the end, mature part is a chatbot, and then the bread and butter. Bread and butter, I think, if there are still issues and pain points, just fix it. Just fix it, I would say. Are there better ways of doing things? Just fix it. Are there things that are not automated yet that make sense to be automated? Say, for example, one of the things that I see in many organizations are not fully automated is the talent review process. Are there opportunities to automate that? Yeah. So I would say broadly this is the case. Um, and then if I may also say, there is another piece that's coming up are all the apps that are out there. Just like on your mobile phone, the different type of apps. Of course, in the last 2-3 years, with COVID and the pandemic, mental well-being is in the forefront. And there are many apps out there about mental well-being. In fact, there's so many that it's very hard to, as a user or as a organization, hard to decide which one to go into. Should we go into? Is there a ROI? And all of that. So many apps are out there in terms of mental well-being, or even coaching. In the past, coaching tends to be a very you use coaching on a very selective basis, only maybe the top management or at most a high pole. There are coaching apps today, that are at a price point that you can actually scale for the wider audience. Right now, the coaching apps, there's a real coach behind it. Will there be a time where a chatbot can coach? Maybe, Maybe, so there are all these other things that are coming in. So really for a HR team, if it's if you have a large enough HR team, there should be a team that's out there scanning in terms of the technology trends and what makes sense to bring in to the organization.
So to really recap, of course, keeping a pulse on what is going on, putting your ears very close to the ground, and understanding how all this can have a material impact on the larger group of population that you're trying to cater to. But at the same time, of course, ensuring that you also play a listening ear on what they need, what are some of the frustrations, and try to see how you can best solve it. And in solving it, of course, not going through the big bang approach, because as we have discussed and agreed, nobody likes changes at the same time. And some people don't even like changes to begin with. So it has to be phased out, it has to be thoughtful, which to come first, who to sample it with, and all this would help to reach to a better situation in the entire implementation cycle. So
Exactly.
thank you so much for sharing all this with us today. Anything else that you'd like to also share with our audience that we
Yeah,
have not
I
asked?
think one area that I did not talk about, right now, I've sort of talked about big HR IT systems and all the apps. There is a whole gamut of what you might call office productivity tools that are not necessary just for HR, but we should actually actively look at that. So example, DocuSign. In the past, pieces of paper goes around and you sign and scan and whatever. DocuSign, Power Docs, RPA. These are tools that can be trained, or rather HR, not HR IT people can be trained to do those things. And I have people that went for 3-4 day training on RPA, and then they look at all their different processes and they implement, and we don't have to depend solely on the IT team or the HR IT team automate our processes. So in the example that I gave, it was actually my com and band team who says, this is a very painful process, and maybe we can do RPA. It's a process that the com and band team handles themselves, not the shared services. So a couple of them went for RPA training and had I suppose, a RPA mentor, and they automate the whole process themselves, saving time and effort, and, FTE in the process. So that's whole part of the, I would call, broader office automation, not necessarily HR IT, that we should explore, because I think there are plenty of opportunities there.
So obviously, implementation of technology to help you to automate, to speed up, to be more efficient, and to be more productive is not just centered on the HR department. It can cut across from even very simple things like administration, perhaps even putting together a meeting. All this could be things that there are technologies to aid you with. And for people who are keen to learn more about yourself and what you do, where can they go to?
Just look me up on my LinkedIn page and message me.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Kevin, for making time today. We've learned so much from this discussion, and I hope the audience feel likewise as well. And we hope all the best for you in the rest of your journey in HR as well as all future HR implementation.
Thank you, Adrian. Thank you for inviting me to be on your show.